My Lord Jesus Christ, I remember standing before the throne, and for some reason, we were surrounded by angels and men alike. And one by one, each one of them hit a knob in front of themselves. On one side, the knob turned to the word salvation, and the other side said condemnation. As I stood before that glorious throne, I could hear a footstep, or a series of footsteps behind me, each one louder than the last. And I knew that it was Satan, taking another step and another step, edging his way closer to me. I watched as every single angel that stood round about, and all the men thereof that had been glorified, turned their backs to me, one by one, until there was only one left. I was as a child, dressed in a small robe with naught but a teddy bear for a collection, and I looked up at you when I realized that you were my only hope. But then things started to get distant when I tried to focus on you. And then I found myself standing in the midst of a forest, dark. And finally those steps that were coming up behind me stopped right just short of touching my back. And I felt a hand come upon my shoulder. And I realized that I was surrounded by forces of darkness. I saw yellow eyes in the black, but none of them made a sound. It was as if some battle had taken place, and some part of me wanted to clench my fist, but I didn't anymore. The only thing that the figure behind me said was that it was time to go. But I kept, for a short while, staring in the direction where I saw you standing at the throne, and I wasn't sure if it was just a dream. But eventually I started to lose hope in that bright light, and it became a dim glow. And every time I saw it somewhere out there in that black, I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination or not. So I turned around and I started to walk with this creature that was behind me. He grasped my hand with a pretend love. We started to go further and further into the darkness until we arrived at a complex. But on the way, I kept looking back. Or rather, I should say, I guess I kept looking up and all about for that little light. We found our way to the complex, and it was well guarded. We passed one security gate after another, and everyone there they weren't human, and they were all looking at me with glee in their eyes. And I realized very soon that I was the only child in this particular facility, as if it was specifically created for me. I thought at some point we would eventually reach our destination, but it just kept getting darker and darker as we went further into this place. Eventually, I wasn't really walking anymore, but it was more like I was zooming out on my own existence, zooming up into the sky and looking down at this complex which was in the middle of nowhere. I could hear the howling and whirling of snow, which gave it a sense of hopelessness and despair because it felt isolated. like it was beyond being found. And at that point, I felt truly alone. No longer in my body, no longer following Satan to this destination. I had one final few words left within me. And that was a pleading that my papa would come and save me. For just a moment, I imagined your shoulder and myself leaning upon it. You were wearing these bright, radiant robes, and you were untouchable by anything dark. I grasped a hold of those robes as you knelt down to embrace me. Still not sure if it was just my imagination or not. As I went back and forth between this and the complex, I grasped your robes and I said, "Please, help me. Do not leave me. I have no one else." And I wept.